You are now tuning into the Resilient Podcast. Enjoy the show.
And welcome to episode 27 of the Resilient Podcast. On our last episode, I had such a pleasure and honor to interview my friend Nina Harris. We talked about her company Blend, which is a new mental health AI company. Like I mentioned in that episode, Nina and I know each other for such a long time. And Nina is one of the greatest people that I've ever known. And I was just so thankful to have her as a guest on the Resilient Podcast. Especially during Women's History Month. I do want to let you all know that for this month, by the way, happy April. I will have another guest as well too. So I don't know which episode. I do know that we do have the anniversary of the Resilient Podcast coming up. And actually, I wanted to talk about looking back at the journey since its premiere from April 19th of last year. The impact of the podcast, that it made, on my healing, resilience and the connections I built along the way. But we'll get into that in a bit. This is episode 27. It's crazy. We're like a few episodes away from episode 30, but I am so thankful for episode 25. Episode 25 was so special for me. And I did it in a special way where I had Diego film me instead of actually being here where I usually film it on StreamYard. I actually had Diego film me do that podcast episode. And it was just such, it just felt so great. So I look forward to doing more episodes like that in the near future. And, of course, that episode, for those that watch it on YouTube, probably enjoyed it. But for those that listen to my podcast on, the streaming sites like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, and et cetera, I promise to do something special for you all as well, too. So in this episode, we are going to talk about resilience in the face of trauma. And, like I said, it's April, so I'm acknowledging that it's a new month. And I want to reflect on personal milestones. A year ago, last week, I was in Philadelphia. And I remember how I felt when I was out there. I remember, first of all, the day that I got to Philadelphia, I was on a megabus going to Philly. And I was going by myself. Diego, my photographer, was already out there. I think a day or two before me. And I got there Friday afternoon. And we had an earthquake in the East Coast. We had an earthquake that was felt, or earthquake aftershock at least, that was felt in the areas of apparently, the Northeast, Boston, New York felt it. My mom was in the hospital at the time, and I felt so bad because, my mom said that she felt it when she was in the hospital. And I said, I wish that I would have been able to spend more time with her, but I was going to Philly for WrestleMania weekend. Jersey felt it, and of course Philadelphia felt it as well too. And I remember when I got there, I saw people talking about it, and I was like, I didn't feel it, but a lot of people said that they felt it. And I remember looking at my phone, and I was following my ex-girlfriend still on Instagram and social media, and I remember her posting like on those new Instagram notes that people share statuses on. She had said not an earthquake, and that's where I knew that it was real. And I was like, wait a minute, so Philadelphia felt it. And like I said, when I got there, it was good to be back. I had gone to Philly earlier that week to do to kick off WrestleMania week actually, and I was there with John and Jess, and we did that video to promote WrestleMania week, and then I went back home, and then I came back on Friday. And when I got back, I felt like, wow, I'm alone. I'm not in a relationship. And we had just been broken up for 2 weeks at that time. We broke up March 21st. And WrestleMania night 1 was April 6th. And night 2 was April 7th. And, that whole week, I was just thinking to myself, I wish that I can call her and ask her if she still would go to WrestleMania with me. And then I also kept saying to myself, like, she's not going to say yes. She's going to say no. She's not into WWE like that, even though she followed it when she was younger. And most like, you guys just broke up. So most likely she's going to say no, because she's going to say like, we just broke up. Why would I go to this event with you? And I was just so sad because, it was still like, it had just happened, right? Like it had just happened. We had just broken up. And a part of me was still like in shock mode from it, and also kind of like in denial. And, I went back home Tuesday, April 9th. And that day was the day that I wrote her a card. And initially, since I knew that I wasn't going to be able to see her for WrestleMania weekend, I had bought her some gifts. When I had went to Philly earlier that week, I went to Eagle Stadium, and to do that promotion with John and Jess, and I bought her a very nice Eagles sweater that was in purple. Purple's her favorite color, and it was one of the first things that I noticed. And when I saw it, I was like, I got to get this for her. And then I got some other gifts together. And what I didn't realize was that those gifts eventually were going to be goodbye gifts. Once I was in Philly, I already knew like these are going to be goodbye gifts. Like these are just gifts that I'm going to give her. It's going to be the last gifts that I give her. And we're probably never going to talk ever again. Or at least it's just like the final gifts that I give her, and hopefully she can receive them well. When April 9th came, that Tuesday, I woke up and I said, today might be the day that, I see her and I could give her these gifts before I go home, or I am just going to drop them off, and hopefully, when she receives it, she'll be able to, reach out to me and say to me, thank you for the gifts. I had called my friend Stephania, and I told her what I was planning to do. And I told her, I think I'm going to say goodbye. And she goes, well, why, Rob? Why would you say goodbye? I said, I don't know. don't feel good. And she said to me, you and her mutually agreed to separate, go your own ways, right? Or at least separate for the time being. And I said, I know, but I just have this feeling. And I remember her telling me that, either she didn't like fully support my decision, but at the same time, she just wanted what was best for me. And she wanted me to do what I thought was best. And what I thought initially at that time was best was for me to part ways, like completely. And eventually I kept saying to myself, I'm going to regret this. I'm going to regret this. I'm going to regret this. So I went back to I left my hotel room. I was in, what was the name of the area that I was in? I think it was like Old City, Philly or something like that. And I left my hotel. I went to a store that sold cards and I bought her the card. And then I went back to my hotel room and I cried. I cried like a baby and I said, do I really want to do this? I think we're on good terms right now, but do I really want to do this? And I wrote out this letter to her. And I actually took a picture of that letter after I wrote it. And, I said to myself, am I ready to do what I'm about to do? And am I going to either regret it or be okay with the decision that I make? And I'm telling you, I was just in my feelings. I was really, really in my feelings. And, 2 days ago, on the 9th, it made a year since I did that. And it was a Tuesday, if I'm not mistaken. And I remember sharing the story with everyone, and I'll share parts of it again. She had moved to a different area, the northeast of Philly. And before I checked out of my hotel, I dropped everything off. I took a cab to her new residence, and I initially went to the leasing office and wanted to leave it there for her because I didn't want her to come home from work and see me there. Initially, I wanted to reach out. Here's the thing. I had reached out that week. She didn't respond. And I had reached out initially to be like, because I knew that the whole, hey, want to come to WrestleMania with me? Can you please come to WrestleMania? I don't think that was going to happen. But at least like, hey, can I see you one more time to say goodbye? Because the last time I had seen her was February 13th, which was the day before Valentine's Day. So had she answered the phone or had she texted me that week and be like, hey, I saw your missed call, but I was sleeping, I would have been like, hey, yeah, I just wanted to drop off something for you and just give you one more hug and say goodbye. And, I didn't get a chance to do that. So long story short, I just ended up dropping the stuff off. So the leasing office, the people had been to lunch. So what I ended up doing was I went into her building and I was able to open the front door, and she lives on the first floor. So I left her gifts on her doorknob with the letter in there. And I left. And as I walked away, I looked at her building one more time and I cried. But then for some reason, the tears didn't want to come out initially. And I felt this pain in my chest. And as I was walking down the block, a ladybug landed on me. And I ticked it off. And then I kept walking and I looked back one more time. And I'm like, I'm really saying goodbye. And the ladybug landed on me again. Well, I don't know if it was another ladybug, but I think it was the same ladybug. So the ladybug landed on me. And 2 days ago I was in my feelings, and I'm feeling that again. So, um, I said goodbye to her, without her hearing it. She never said goodbye to me though. When we broke up, it was good night. I love you. And, um, yeah, sorry. It was just really bad when I got in that car again. I walked down the block, I ordered an Uber and took it right back to my hotel. When I got to my hotel, I texted my friend Stephanie and I said, "Hey, I did the thing." And she goes, "Are you okay?" I said, "No, I'm not." She goes, "All right. You know, what do you think is going to happen next?" And I said, "I don't know. When she gets home from work, she's going to say, hey, um, I saw your gifts." So this is what happened. Fast forward. I am now taking an Amtrak back to New York City in the evening time. And as I get on the Amtrak, or I think I was already on the Amtrak, I get a message from her. But this is what I had done prior that day. And I may have mentioned it on the podcast before. And if I didn't, I'm probably saying it for the first time. But I'm pretty sure I mentioned it before. When I walked away, I deleted her off of social media. I was following her on Instagram and I was friends with her on Facebook. I had deleted her and I deleted her phone number off my phone. That's the part that I regretted doing all of that. Maybe if I didn't do that, who knows? We probably would have still been in contact. Because again, we didn't break up on bad terms. At least to her, we were not breaking up on bad terms. So I'm on the Amtrak and, I see this. I think my phone was on Do Not Disturb because I was listening to music and her message comes in. And she says to me, like, you left these, you left. So I'm actually going to read to you guys the message. And this is what she said. And this was a year ago. On April 9th, 2024, she wrote at 9:14 p.m. Hi. So I know you were in town for WrestleMania and got to experience it, and I'm happy for you. But can you please not come to my apartment unannounced and leave things on my door? I would appreciate you letting me know ahead of time you wanted to leave something, but having access to my apartment where we don't even speak makes it more of a safety issue. The bag was torn, which means someone probably tried to look through it. Please stop getting me stuff and getting me gifts. I appreciate the thoughts. It's very kind of you, but I don't feel comfortable accepting gifts, and I've asked you for a while if you could stop getting me things. I didn't get back to her till 2 days later, which is today's date, April 11th, because I just had to sit there and process things. And I got back to her April 11th, which was Thursday. And I sent her the message late at night. I sent her a voice note for like about 6 minutes. And she got back to me April 12th, which was Friday. She wrote back to me in the morning. And then I didn't get back to her until the 13th. And that was a Saturday. And Saturday, the 13th, was the last time that she ever said anything to me. And the 13th will be in 2 days, which is Sunday. So, yeah. Had I not deleted her off of social media And had I, probably just answered her like, hey, I understand that you didn't want me at your doorstep, but I tried but I did explain that to her in the voice note that I sent. I did explain like, hey, like I had reached out earlier that week, and her response was like, well, look, since I'm getting ready for my new career, the training stuff, the training aspect of it, I'm going to bed a little earlier these days. But I was emotional. I was feeling it. And I wish I would have responded better, and I wish I would have acted better during that time. And I was recently talking to a friend of mine about this situation. And, my friend had asked me, like, some of my other friends had asked me, like, hey, what could have you done differently? And I said, I could have done a lot of things differently. I could have responded to her differently. Even if she met me with a little bit of hostility or whatever the case may be, still respond to her to kindness, still be that man that I was. But, this is what breaks my heart, that she got the kind version of me up until the very end. But when I kept seeing how she would respond to me, a part of me was like, look, you guys are not together anymore. So if you want to be an a-hole, you can be an a-hole. She's been an a-hole with you for far too long. It's okay for you to do it back. And one thing we don't do, folks, is we don't match people's energy. I know a lot of people that will sit here and say, no, I match people's energy all day, every day. We're not here to match people's energy. If people treat you with hostility, if people treat you like you're an option, or if people treat you like they undermine you, or they don't see your value, whatever the case may be, that's them. That's a reflection of their character. It's not a reflection of your character. So always remember that. It has nothing to do with you. It has a lot to do with them and their personality and who they are. So don't take it personal. And I know it's easier said than done, but the truth is, don't take it personal. So, April 13th, 2024 was the last time that the love of my life, the woman that I loved with all my heart, last shared something with me text-wise. And, I'm reflecting on how that moment shaped my journey. I started the Resilient Podcast like a few days after that. And, it helped me shape my journey and the lessons I've learned since then. And, let's talk about understanding trauma and resilience in this particular situation. Trauma can come in many forms: loss, assault, physical injury, addiction. And you ask yourself, how would you define resilience in the face of trauma? In my case, resilience, like I've mentioned before, is not just about bouncing back, but about learning how to navigate through pain and come out stronger. It's about adaptation, perseverance, and the ability to find meaning in hardship. My friend had asked me a few days ago, because, my friend reached out to me, saw that I had written a post last weekend about WrestleMania, and I had wrote something on social media about like how I felt, Cody Rhodes finishing his story. I posted a video because I went to Philadelphia on the 7th, which was Monday. And I went there at midnight. And Diego and I recorded a video in Philly to celebrate the 1 year anniversary of WrestleMania Night 2 and the 1 year anniversary of Cody Rhodes finishing the story. And when I posted that video, I shared something, and it caused a lot of people to reach out to me. And my friend asked me, hey, like, I'm just reaching out to you to see how you're doing, because it seems like, you're going through another, memory. And I said, yeah. So my friend goes to me, I have a question. Like, in your personal journey, what has been the most challenging part of coping with trauma? And I was like, normally no one's asked me about trauma. Everybody's just talking about the resilience part of everything and whatnot. So I said, well, one of the hardest parts is accepting that some questions will never be answered. And I've spoken about that before. I had a lot of questions. They never got answered. Like the lack of closure, the lingering pain, and the fear of never truly healing can be overwhelming. But, it happens. It really does. So my friend says to me, well, Rob, I have a question. Do you believe that healing is a linear process? And I've answered that before. So I was like, no, healing comes in waves. Some days you feel like you've moved forward. Like most of us feel like, oh, I feel good. I'm over this. I finally don't, I feel free. Some days you feel like you've moved forward and then a trigger brings you back. And the key here is learning to navigate those setbacks without losing sight of progress. And that's just the truth. So I remember watching a video of that week end of, well, the WrestleMania week where I remember doing that whole thing with John and Jess. And then I thought about the month after that in May, where we celebrated a month after WrestleMania, and I went to Philly again to do that WrestleMania survey. And I had Justin and Kyle there to surprise the guys with some Papa Tui. And Kyle and Justin were talking about resilience. They were sharing their stories. Justin talked about how he unfortunately lost a friend under the influence, and Kyle shared about his sister passing away to cancer at a very young age. And, just listening to their journey, listening how they coped, what they did, like they started the whole painting, the mural painting stuff, like, in a way to heal. Just listening to that was just such a beautiful story. But truly, how they found strength is what really, really, really like inspired me. So just listening to them. And then also when I asked them, what is your message to the world? Those videos are on my social media. Some of them are actually still pinned on my Instagram. So if you guys follow me on Instagram at Rob Aurelius, you'll be able to find the videos there. And if you follow me on Twitter, the video should be there as well too. The videos are also on my business page, ARCG Media. So if you go to ARCG Media, you'll see the pinned videos there, and you'll also see them pinned also on the Twitter page. And my advice to anyone currently facing this similar situation is remember that healing looks different for everyone. And this is why my healing journey was much different than anybody else's. And, for those that were out there like complaining, like, oh, you're still talking about your ex, you haven't gotten over her. This is when I was like 3-4 minutes into the breakup, and everybody was most people were telling me, oh, move on, move on. Remember, folks, that healing looks different for everyone, but one thing remains true. You are not alone. And finding support, whether through therapy, your loved ones, or even personal outlets, it's crucial. It's important. So remember, you're not alone. Talk about it. Speak about it. And like I said, There's resources available. If you can't find a therapist, I'll help you find one. Just reach out to me on social media and let me know. I created a personal outlet. I created this podcast so that I can talk about my pain, so that I can talk about everything that happened. And it's been a journey. And I remember that friend of mine asked me, have you told people what you would do if you could go back in time and if you would change anything about how you handled your trauma? And I said, yes. I spoke about it with several friends. I spoke about it through my podcast a few times. And I've also talked about it with my therapist. And I said, look, the way I see things, if I could go back in time, I remember there were times I let my pain define me. But ultimately, every experience led me to where I am today. Am I fully healed? No. I just had to go through the 1 year anniversary since we broke up. So I was, my heart was in shambles. But I want people to understand that regret is natural. But growth is what matters. And, while we're on the subject about, creating the Resilient Podcast as a personal outlet, and also the fact that the Resilient Podcast is going to be celebrating its 1 year anniversary this month, how did the Resilient Podcast become a tool for healing is what most have asked. I will explain why it became a personal outlet, why I decided to make it a personal outlet. And this platform, when I initially started it with my old co-host, Josh, it gave me and him a space not only to process our pain, but to connect with others through similar struggles. And that was the intention. That was the reason why I created the Resilient Podcast. It essentially turned my heartbreak into something meaningful. And, with the 1 year anniversary of the Resilient Podcast coming up, I want to talk about some of my reflections. I have said this before because, in 2020, I remember the talks of, people saying, hey, since we're dealing with COVID right now, a lot of people are starting podcasts. Are you going to be one of them? And I said, no, I'm not going to start a podcast. And in 2022, when ARCG Media turned, I think it was, 2023, when the Resilient Podcast was celebrating 10 years. That was actually the year that I met my ex, but I met her 2 months later because the 10th anniversary of ARCG Media was in June of 2023. Everybody kept shouting at that event, podcast. And I said, no. But like I said, I never imagined podcasting. And I also never imagined this podcast will become what it is right now, what it is today. What started as a way to share, my struggle, Josh's struggle, has now become a space for others to share theirs. I've had people come on this podcast to share their story, talk about resilience, talk about reflecting. And I have a message for my listeners, for those that watch the Resilient Podcast, those that have tuned in to all 26, now 27 episodes. I have a message for those that are struggling with their own trauma. And this is my message to you. Remember that you are stronger than you think. And healing is not about erasing the past, but learning how to live with it in a way that empowers you. Just like I allowed my pain to empower me. Please remember to keep pushing forward, even on the hardest days. And for Christmas, I received this beautiful box for those that are watching on YouTube right now from James. And it says, "You got this." And they are inspiring quotes. And as I'm telling you to keep pushing forward, even on the hardest days, I also want to include something from that card. And it says, "Focus on all the good. Don't focus on the bad, folks. The bad is there for a reason, but you have to learn from it. You have to learn from it." And while we're on that subject, I want to share with you all that, I've been talking to you guys about these formulas that I've been using for months from Nala Health. There's one particular formula from the terpene effects, and it's called focus. And focus literally helps me. Like, I take a drop of focus for every podcast, so that even though I could be doing an episode where I feel like the words can't come out, I can still produce. So I take a little bit of focus, and I take a little bit of desire as well too. And I take the desire so it could give me that motivation to want to do the podcast, and the focus so that I could just stay focused. And I surround myself with positive things. I always hold in every episode the 5-year journal, the memory journal that she gave me. And, today's question on that memory journal literally says this. This is the question that it asks us today. And I haven't filled it out yet. Today is the 11th. And the question is, what was your most recent victory or success? And last year I wrote, I guess my recent victory was finding a way to go to this year's WrestleMania, because I was struggling last year to go to WrestleMania, because mentally, did I want to go to WrestleMania? Yes and no. Once I was there, was I able to cope with it? Yes and no. I wanted to be there with her. The whole plan was to be there with her. The whole plan was for me to stay with her. Even though I had a hotel booked way before I met her, thank God I kept that reservation. I wanted to be there with her. I wanted to be there with her. And I didn't do those things, So, folks, we're getting to the end of this episode. And I want to thank you all for always tuning in. I appreciate you all from the bottom of my heart, and you all know that. And, the next episode, most likely I will be in Las Vegas for WrestleMania. I will probably do that episode out there that weekend, Easter weekend. And that's going to be a milestone that I'm going to be I'm going to need a lot of desire and focus and all the other formulas. So on that note, on that topic, visit nalahealth.com. It's right here on the bottom. And when you make a purchase, always use my code TRP10 for 10% off of your purchase. And, like I was saying earlier, I try to surround myself around positivity, and I try to surround myself to things that keep me motivated. Like this cup that I have here, this, water bottle has a smiley face on it. And I bought it for a reason. It's my favorite color, black, for those that are watching on YouTube. And it's got a smiley face on it. And, if I'm having a bad day, I look at it. And I told someone that I'm very close with, and I had told her the reason why I bought this bottle is because of the smiley face, but one of the smiley face's eyes is actually a heart. And it reminds me about love. It reminds me that I want to move with love and that I want to live surrounded by love and I want to love everyone. So that's my way of trying to stay positive. That's my way of always trying to push forward. Like I mentioned to you all, to keep pushing forward even on your hardest days. And, folks, it's always a pleasure and an honor to do these episodes. And I do have a message right behind me that says resilience comes from within you. And that's my message to the world today. Resilience comes within you. That's where it comes from. Everything comes within. So find your resilience. And your resilience will find you. This concludes episode 27. And again, thank you for tuning in. If you would like to submit your story about resilience, or if you would like to be on the Resilient Podcast, just reach out to me. And right here on the bottom, it says follow the Resilient Podcast on Twitter and Instagram at the Resilient Pod. Also follow us at TRP Tribune right here on the bottom, or send us, an inquiry at resiliencetribune.com. And on resiliencetribune.com, you can check out our merch from For Your Wear. Shout out to my partner Blue for creating beautiful stuff. And you'll also see the stories of resilience, because every month we share a story of resilience. So the story for resilience, is going to post later this month. But, since January, there has been stories of resilience. Last month's story of resilience, which was written by Natalie, such a beautiful story. Make sure you folks check it out at resiliencetribune.com. But this is all I have for you folks. Remember that, trauma is something, but we can overcome it. We can work towards it. And with that being said, I look forward to the 1-year anniversary episode of the Resilient Podcast. I really do. I will be alone, unfortunately, for that episode. I won't have Josh by my side like I did for episode 1. But if Josh ever watches this episode, I just want to tell him that he's missed and that hopefully someday we can connect down the road. But folks, thank you for always tuning in. Thank you for sharing your feedback with me. I appreciate it. And like I said, find resilience so that resilience can find you. And with that, I also want to include always remain resilient. So I thank you all again for tuning in. And I look forward to episode 28. But for now, this is Rob Aurelius. And I want to thank you for tuning in. I'll see you all soon. Peace.